The moment she dies, we'll get everything. And it won't take long. That's what I heard from my niece, the one I raised as my own daughter. My name is Evelyn Hart. I'm 58 years old, and for most of my life I believed my worth was in taking care of others. I raised my niece as if she were my child, worked myself to exhaustion, gave up on my own dreams, always thinking love and gratitude would come back someday. Instead, what I got in return was debt, disdain, and silence. Stories like mine cannot stay hidden. Subscribe to the channel and share yours with me. It was an ordinary evening. The table was almost set. The smell of roasted chicken filled the kitchen, and the ticking clock on the wall kept pace with my slow steps. Then came the voices, not casual talk. Whispered words, followed by knowing laughter. First, I heard Lily's husband. "We need more money. This house has to be ours once and for all." And then, like a knife to the chest, Lily's voice, "The moment she dies, we'll get everything. And it won't take long." Silence, then muffled laughter. They laughed at my life, at my time, at my death. The tray I was holding almost slipped from my hands. My heart raced. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just stood there, frozen, feeling every word tear another page from the story of my life. The niece I raised as a daughter, the baby I gave up dreams and sleepless nights for, was now planning a future without me. I remembered the first night Lily slept in my home, just a baby, her parents gone from the picture, and me stepping in without a second thought. I spent the whole night awake, rocking her in my arms, promising myself she would have a better life than mine. And now, all these years later, the repayment for that promise was a cruel laugh. I remembered the days I skipped buying clothes for myself to make sure Lily had a new school uniform, the endless overtime hours I worked to pay for courses she never cared about. Every choice I made was to give her a future. And now she spoke of my death as if it were a financial solution. The room seemed to shrink around me. The walls echoed their laughter, as if they too were in on the secret. A bitter taste filled my mouth, as if I had swallowed poison. For a moment, I wanted to burst in and confront them, but I held back. The shock was stronger than the anger. This wasn't just betrayal, it was ingratitude, cold and calculated. I remembered Lily as a teenager, looking me in the eyes and saying, "You'll never be alone, Auntie. I'll always take care of you." Back then, those words sounded so sweet. Tonight, remembering them, they felt like nothing but a lie dressed up as love. And in that moment, I finally understood something I had always feared. Blood doesn't guarantee love. You can raise, feed, sacrifice, but nothing forces someone to be grateful. That night, I went to my room in silence. I lay down in bed drained of strength, but with one certainty. From that moment on, I would never be the same. I didn't yet know how, but I knew I would change my destiny. Lily's everything wouldn't begin with my death. It would begin with my life. The sun was already streaming through the kitchen window when I opened my eyes. It wasn't birdsong that woke me, but the old wall clock, ticking too loudly for such a quiet house. I got up slowly, the same way I do every morning. The kettle was already set on the stove, the coffee grounds measured into the worn-out cloth filter. I made coffee almost without thinking, my hands moving out of habit, as if my body alone remembered the path of mornings. The strong aroma filled the air, blending with the smell of day-old bread warming in the oven. As I set the table, I noticed I still laid it out the same way, plates lined up, silverware for more than one person, even napkins folded into neat triangles, a habit I never broke, even though I almost always ate alone. It was strange, even without guests, without anyone to share the bread or coffee, I still prepared everything as if the house were full. Maybe because, for so many years, my world revolved around serving someone else. I sat down and stared at the empty chairs. The memory came uninvited. I was only 20 when Lily was left in my arms. My sister, lost in her own mistakes, disappeared, and I became the one responsible. I still remember the sour smell of spoiled milk mixed with her endless crying. That moment, my life stopped being mine. I had dreams. I wanted to study nursing, work in a hospital, maybe even leave that small town for something bigger. But all of it faded the day Lily came into my life. I worked wherever I could, stores, houses, laundry. Every coin I earned went to milk, diapers, medicine. I slept little, ate poorly, but Lily never went without. I remember one night, staring at my college application, almost complete. Next to it sat Lily's crib, her cries filling the room. And I knew I couldn't have both. I tore the form in half. I chose Lily. From then on, my choices stopped being mine. By the time I came back from my memories, the coffee in my cup had already gone cold. I looked at the napkin beside the plate, folded neatly for no one, and I thought, how many years of my life were spent setting tables, serving, caring, for someone who now laughed at my existence as if it were nothing but dead weight. I stood up, washed the barely dirty dishes, and left them to dry in the rack. I looked around the kitchen, the cracked tiles, the worn dish towels, the old table that had seen so many meals. Every detail carried the mark of a lifetime of sacrifice. The problem was, none of those marks belonged to me. It was as if the whole house bore witness to my giving, but not to my worth. At that moment, I felt an invisible weight pressing on my shoulders, not from age, not from a tired body. It was the weight of a life spent chasing dreams that weren't mine. I opened the back door. The sun hit me hard, lighting up the small yard where so many of my stories had unfolded. The grass was uneven, some patches green, others dry, forcing their way through the broken stones. On the clothesline, two pieces swayed lazily in the morning breeze, a faded sheet and a worn towel. I touched the rough fabric, remembering how many times those lines held not just laundry, but my hope. It was there, in that same yard, that I spent hours sewing, sometimes standing, sometimes on a makeshift stool, trying to turn scraps into Lily's school uniforms. The needle-piercing fabric, my fingers blistered. The sound of cheap scissors cutting market fabric under the dim kitchen light. Other kids had perfect uniforms. Lily wore the ones I stitched at night. I stayed quiet, proud inside, even when someone whispered that the seams looked crooked. There was one winter night I'll never forget. I sewed a navy blue coat until dawn because Lily wanted so badly to look like the other girls. When she left the house wearing it, her eyes shining, I thought it was worth every hour. But looking back now, I realized that shine didn't last. The gratitude never came. Every stitch I sewed turned into a bitter memory of devotion met with indifference. The wind tugged at the sheet, and for a moment, it looked like a white ghost waving at me. I breathed in the scent of damp earth mixed with neglected plants clinging to the corners of the yard. That yard was my refuge, but also my prison. It held my tears, my lullabies, my stolen dreams whispered over piles of laundry. Every crack in the ground held a memory. None of them were mine. I remembered one stormy night, water pouring through the ceiling as I ran with buckets, patching leaks between sewing shifts. I worked the next day exhausted, never complaining because Lily needed me. Now, that night felt like the perfect symbol of my life, patch after patch, always trying to stop everything from collapsing. As I gathered the clothes, I thought, how many times had I been that faded sheet, worn thin, stretched, surviving through sun and storm, never appreciated. Everything I did for Lily was invisible, and the deepest wound wasn't being forgotten, it was being mocked. I went back inside. The kitchen felt smaller, suffocating. The house itself felt like a museum of sacrifices. Every chair, every crack, every wall whispered about what I gave up. Later, I sat in the living room chair, the afternoon light pouring in, turning the dust into golden specks. I closed my eyes, and the memory dragged me back. Lily, as a teenager, laughing with her friends. One asked, "Is your aunt like your mom?" Lily smirked, "Of course not. She's just the one who pays the bills." Their laughter hit me like a slap. I stood there, holding the hot iron, the hiss of steam mixing with their voices. I stayed silent, as always. But silence doesn't erase pain, it only buries it deeper. Another memory, Lily's birthday. I spent weeks saving, baking, decorating, making sure she'd feel special. And yet, during the party, I heard her whisper to a friend, "My aunt always overdoes it. It's like she wants to prove something." My heart broke quietly as I smiled and cleared plates. Years later, I still carried that pain. Not just ingratitude but ridicule. I went to the mirror in my room. The reflection staring back wasn't the girl who once dreamed of nursing school. It was a tired woman, gray hair undone, hands scarred from needles and detergent. And yet, behind the exhaustion, I caught a glimpse of something small. A spark. Maybe there was still time. The house grew darker as night fell. I wrapped myself in a scratchy blanket, the closest thing I had to an embrace. The silence inside was louder than the wind outside. I remembered Lily at 7, hugging me tight, whispering, "Auntie, you'll never be alone. I'll always take care of you." I believed it. I believed every sacrifice would be repaid with love. But now, those words rang like mockery. Later that night, I found the envelope the mailman had dropped earlier. Thick paper, bold red letters, past due notice. Inside, numbers I didn't recognize, loans, debts, my name printed across them. Not enough that they were planning my death. They were already bleeding me dry, using my name, draining every piece of trust I had left. The weight of that paper crushed me more than years of sacrifice ever did. But as midnight struck, I understood two things. First, I was more alone than I had ever been. Second, my silence could not go on. If they used my name to create debt, they would hear my voice demand the cost. That night, the weight of my life turned into the spark of my revolt. The sun hadn't yet warmed the day when I sat in the living room with the envelope in my hand. I hadn't slept all night. The exhaustion throbbed behind my eyes. The paper felt heavier than it should. The night before had been torment. After opening that envelope with the word collection stamped in red, sleep became impossible. I tossed in bed for hours, listening to the creaks of the old house and the faint hum of insects drawn to the streetlight outside. The envelope stayed on the table like it had a life of its own, reminding me every second that it wasn't just paper, it was a sentence. At dawn, I rose earlier than usual. My back ached, my eyes burned, but the weight on my chest was stronger than any pain. I knew I had to go to the bank. I couldn't ignore it anymore. I brewed strong coffee, but the bitterness was harsher than usual. Sitting with the cup in my hands, I stared at the kitchen walls, trying to summon courage. Every sip felt like a push to step out of the house that both trapped me and sheltered me. I grabbed my worn leather bag, the one that had lasted more than 15 years. I slipped the envelope inside with my documents, zipped it shut with trembling hands. Looking one last time at the living room before leaving, I thought, today I'll find out just how far Lily went. The morning air was cold against my face as I walked to the bus stop. Each step was heavier than the last. People rushed past me, backpacks, grocery bags, each carrying their own battles. And I wondered how many of them carried betrayal on their shoulders too. The bank was crowded, but I only saw the floor. I took a number, sat in a hard chair, and each ticket called hammered against my chest. When it was finally my turn, I sat across from a young teller with bright red nails and an impatient look. "Good morning, ma'am. How can I help?" she asked, already typing before even meeting my eyes. I slid the envelope across the counter. "I received this notice. I need to know what's going on." She opened it, scanned it quickly, and kept typing. The clatter of the keyboard seemed too loud in the tense silence. Then she looked up, her eyes sharper now. "It shows you have 3 active loans in your name," she said, as casually as if she were reading the weather report. My throat went dry. "In my name," I repeated, stunned. "Yes, ma'am." She turned the screen slightly, rows of numbers glowing like death sentences, all taken within the past 2 years. "The amounts are high, but I never asked for a loan. Never." My voice shook, but held. She sighed, like she'd heard it before. "Everything is here. Signatures, documents, proof." "Let me see them," I demanded, trying to keep steady. She went to the printer and returned with a stack of papers. She handed them to me carelessly, as if they were nothing, but to me, they weighed tons. I looked down, and froze. There it was, my signature, or rather, an imitation. The E in Evelyn tilted awkwardly, the Y curled too wide. I recognized it instantly. It was Lily. My palms slicked with sweat, the papers sliding through my fingers. The teller kept explaining interest rates, due dates, penalties, but I heard nothing. All I saw were those sloppy, familiar strokes across contracts tied to my name. My niece, I thought, the one I raised as my daughter. I left the bank like someone walking out of a courtroom after a guilty verdict. The sun outside was harsher, but it didn't warm me. I stumbled along the sidewalk, clutching the crumpled papers. The noise of traffic, the vendors shouting, the horns, it all felt muffled, like I was underwater. I collapsed onto a bench outside a bakery. The cold metal pressed through my dress, but I barely felt it. I looked at the contracts again. 3 loans, 3 chains shackled to my name. Tracing my finger along the forged signature, I felt ice run through me. No hesitation, no carrot, was scrawled quickly, without guilt. She had done it knowing I'd never notice. I wanted to cry, but no tears came. My eyes were dry from a lifetime of crying. What rose instead was different. A cold rage, quiet but burning. I thought of Lily rifling through my drawers one day. "Auntie, can I borrow the blue folder? I need a paper," she'd said. I hadn't thought twice. I trusted her. That's when she copied my ID, my documents, everything she needed. How could she? I whispered again and again. The baby I once cradled, defended, sacrificed for she had turned my name into a weapon. And worst of all, she wasn't even sorry. The night before, I'd overheard her laughing about waiting for my death. Now, I saw her hand in these debts. For years, I thought fear of losing her kept me silent. But sitting on that bench, I realized it wasn't fear, it was habit. Habit of shrinking, of believing love meant tolerating everything. And that habit was killing me. I stood, clutching the papers, and walked home with a fire growing inside me. When I opened the gate, the hinges groaned louder than usual. The sun was setting, orange and red bleeding across the sky. But I felt no beauty, only a storm inside. Lily was sprawled on the couch, legs draped over the armrest, scrolling on her phone. She glanced at me, distracted. "Hey, Auntie," she mumbled. I didn't answer. I dropped the papers on the dining table. The slap of paper against wood made her look up, annoyed. "What's this?" she asked. "You tell me," I said, my voice firmer than I expected. "Loans, in my name, with my signature, your attempt at it." For a moment, silence. Then Lily laughed nervously. "Oh, Auntie, it's just money. I was going to fix it. You're making this too dramatic. Money." My chest burned. "You put 3 loans in my name, Lily, 3. She rolled her eyes, tossed her phone aside, and stood, crossing her arms. "Stop exaggerating. You know, one day, everything will be mine anyway at the house. Everything. So what's the difference if I used some of it early?" Her words hit me like a blow. "The difference," I said, steady but shaking inside, "is that I'm still alive. And while I'm alive, none of this is yours." Her face hardened. No guilt, no fear, only coldness. "You've always been like this, Auntie. So dramatic. I'm just speeding up the inevitable." The blood rushed to my head. "The inevitable is that I gave you my whole life, Lily, my dreams, my future. And this is your thanks." She stepped closer, eyes sharp. "No one asked you to." The words sliced deeper than any debt. I staggered, not in fear but in disbelief. "No one asked. I did it because I loved you. Because I thought you'd see me as a mother." She sighed, impatient, like she was tired of hearing the same story. "Well, I grew up. I have my own life now. You should stop meddling so much." Meddling. My hands shook around the papers. "Forging my signature isn't meddling. It's a crime." She smirked. "Crime? Who's going to report me?" "You, my own aunt." For a moment, I froze. Her tone was daring, certain I'd never stand against her. I looked straight into her eyes. Maybe that's exactly what I should do. Her smirk vanished. She studied me, uncertain. But I already knew this wasn't a bluff. Something in me had changed forever. I thought back to her 18th birthday. I had baked a cake, set candles, and told her, "You're an adult now, but you'll always be my girl." She hugged me, crying, and whispered, "I'll never leave you, Auntie." That memory now stung like poison. The wall clock struck 7. The ticking filled the room like a hammer. Lily snatched up her phone and muttered, "I don't have time for this," before storming out, the door slamming behind her. I stood alone, staring at the papers scattered on the table. The rage still burned, but underneath it was something sharper, clarity. There was no going back. The girl who once promised never to leave me was now a woman who saw me only as an obstacle. If I did nothing, I would die not only alone, but exploited and erased. I picked up the papers again, folded them carefully, and thought, she thinks she's already won, but she doesn't know me at all. The silence after she left was heavy, absolute. Just me, the ticking clock, and the contracts in my hand. I went to the mirror, in my bedroom. The woman staring back wasn't weak anymore. Yes, she had wrinkles, gray hair, but there was something new in her eyes, resolve. Every wrinkle was no longer just sacrifice, it was survival. Every strand of gray hair was no longer defeat, it was defiance. I touched my face and whispered, "Enough." That night, I understood, the Evelyn who stayed quiet, submissive, and willing to accept anything in the name of love. She was gone. What was born in her place was a woman who would not be silent, even against her own blood. The debt papers were no longer just threats. They were proof. Proof that Lily had betrayed me. Proof that I had every reason to cut her out completely. And tomorrow, I would start. The first step. Take back what was mine. And it would begin with the car. The car sat in the driveway as I stepped outside to sweep the sidewalk that morning. The sun hit the faded red paint, revealing scratches that were never fixed. The wire fence cast shadows across the hood, like a net keeping the car trapped in place. I stared at it for minutes, broom frozen in my hands. How many times had that car, registered in my name, been paraded by Lily as a trophy? How many times had she used it to flaunt a life she never earned? I remembered nights coming home late from work, only to find it parked outside bars, when Lily wasn't even old enough to be there. I remembered times I needed to get to the hospital, or even just the grocery store, and all she said was, "Not today, Auntie, I already made plans." The car was mine, but I never owned it. A tightness gripped my chest. That car had become the symbol of years of silent submission, years of letting myself be pushed aside without raising my voice. I glanced at the key hanging on the kitchen wall. I grabbed it, the cold metal pressing into my palm, and thought, "It's time." I went back out, still staring at the car in the driveway, and decided I would sell it. Not just because I needed the money, though I did, but because I needed to take away one of Lily's symbols of control. Inside, I grabbed my phone. With trembling hands, I took pictures of the car from every angle. Each click felt like a small step toward freedom. I posted the ad online. Within hours, a buyer called. I sat on the edge of my bed, my legs shaking. I wasn't just selling a car. I was selling a piece of my history, my illusions. But it was also the beginning of the end of a cycle. From the porch, I could see the car through the gate. The afternoon sun reflected off the hood, and suddenly I was back in time, to the day I bought it. It was the first big thing I ever owned. I saved for years, working double shifts, giving up things I wanted just to feel secure. No more crowded buses, no more begging neighbors for rides. I remember signing the papers at the dealership, heart racing, hands trembling, but with pride in my eyes. That day, I thought, this car will give us freedom, and for a while, it felt true. Then Lily got her driver's license. With her eyes shining, she begged, "Please, Auntie, let me drive it, just a little." I hesitated, then handed her the keys. Her joy looked genuine. She sat behind the wheel, careful at first, pulling slowly out of the street. I watched, proud. I thought, I gave her something I never had, a chance to feel free. But the pride didn't last. The car started disappearing from the driveway. First, short drives, then parties, weekend trips, errands I never knew about. Every time I asked for the keys, there was an excuse. "Not today, Auntie. I already promised the girls. I have to get to work. You understand, right?" And I always understood, or convinced myself that I should. One day stands out. I had chest pains and needed to go to the hospital. I asked Lily for the car. She was getting ready to go out and said, without even looking at me, "Not today, Auntie. I already have plans." Her plans were a party, I knew, so I took 2 crowded buses, gripping the hard seats while holding my pain in silence. At the hospital, the doctor said it was just stress. I smiled at him, but inside I cried. It wasn't just stress. It was years of neglect disguised as love. Another memory, Lily older, tossing bags into the trunk. "I'll be gone for the weekend, Auntie. Just a quick trip." I asked how she paid for it. She just laughed. "I always find a way." Back then, I thought she saved her wages. But now, looking at the debt papers, I understood. Her way always involved using me. The car, once a symbol of independence, had become the weapon that chained me down. That evening, as I waited for the buyer, I realized my whole life had been just that. Things in my name, sacrifices I made, turned into someone else's convenience. But not anymore. The car would be the first to go. Then, everything else. The buyer arrived, inspected it, and agreed to take it. The offer was slightly below what I asked, but it was done. I stood, pulled the key from the hook, and placed it in his hand. The metallic click was small, almost invisible, but inside me, it thundered. It was official. The car was no longer mine. That same day, I went to the bank and paid off the debts. Walking out, I breathed deeply. The air felt lighter, as if the whole city had opened up around me. Back home, I brewed chamomile tea, sat on the porch, and thought, if I could sell the car, I can sell the house. Nothing will hold me here anymore. The garage sat empty, glowing under the streetlight. For years, I had overlooked that space, always filled. Now, in its emptiness, I saw it clearly. I closed my eyes, memories flashing, Lily driving in late, laughing on the phone with friends, but the film was ending. I had sold the car, and with it, the idea that my life revolved around Lily's wants. I remembered the day she showed off to her friends. "This is my aunt's car, but I use it more than she does." They laughed, and I smiled faintly, pretending not to care. Inside, I even felt pride. I thought I was giving her freedom. Now I knew the truth. I wasn't giving her freedom. I was handing her the keys to my own prison. Later, Lily burst in, furious. "How could you sell the car without telling me? I used it every day." I folded my arms and met her eyes. "The car was mine, Lily, in my name, paid with my work, and the money went to clear debts you left on me, to clean my name." She froze, surprised. She wasn't used to this Evelyn, the one who spoke, who didn't accept that Evelyn was gone. When she stormed out, slamming the door, I pulled the debt papers from my purse and set them on the table, beside the receipt from the bank showing a zero balance. As I looked at them, one thought grew inside me. If I could let go of the car, my proudest possession, I could let go of anything, even the house. The thought sent a chill through me. The house that held all my sacrifices could become just another memory. And more than that, I could decide what would happen to it. Then I remembered the will. Years ago, I had put Lily's name on it. I thought it was fair. I raised her as my own. But now, after everything, I knew, leaving her name there was signing my own sentence. She was already benefiting in my life. I wouldn't let her benefit in my death. The next morning, I would tear the will to pieces, and with every shred, I would begin rebuilding the woman Lily never believed I could be. Dawn came quietly, but something inside me was screaming. I got out of bed before the sun rose, heart racing, carrying a certainty I could no longer ignore. I went to the bedroom closet and opened the bottom drawer where I kept my important documents. Inside a worn blue folder was the will, the one I drew up years ago, convinced I was doing the right thing. I pulled the folder out carefully. The plastic scraped my fingers, cold as the thought of Lily benefiting from something she never earned. I sat on the edge of the bed, took a breath, and opened it. There it was, the paper, neatly folded, stamped, and sealed, official words, validating a decision that no longer felt like mine. I read the opening line, every word taunting me. "I hereby declare that I leave all my assets." I shut my eyes. I saw Lily's mocking smile, heard her say, "One day, it'll all be mine anyway." Anger coursed through me like electricity. I gripped the document, felt the roughness of the paper, and without a second thought, I began to tear. The dry rip echoed through the room. I tore it into small pieces, each rip matched by tears that finally fell not from sorrow, but from release. When I finished, the pieces were scattered across the floor like white snow over the rug. I stared at them and thought, there's no going back. And thank God for that. After the last scrap hit the carpet, I stood there for minutes, just looking down. It felt like I was facing the remains of a lifetime of submission. My heart was still racing, but for the first time in ages it wasn't fear, it was relief. I stood, grabbed pen and paper, sat at the desk, and laid a blank sheet before me. Writing a new will by hand wasn't just a legal act, it was an act of courage, almost vengeance. Every word would turn a scar into a decision. The pen tip met the page. "I, Evelyn Hart, declared this to be my last will and testament." The words came steady. My hand no longer shook. I continued. "All of my assets, real and personal, shall not be designated to any blood relative." I paused, drew a deep breath. For a second, I heard Lily's little girl voice in my head. "You'll never be alone, Auntie. I'll always take care of you." The pen nearly slipped. Then I remembered the night she laughed with her husband about how my death wouldn't be far off. The contrast steeled me. I wrote on, "I leave my home in full, and any remaining savings, to be directed to purposes of my choosing during my lifetime, in accordance with my wishes." The page filled with words, but what I saw were years of stifled screams finally given a voice. I remembered a summer afternoon when Lily was about to start college. I had scraped and sacrificed for years to make that possible. She hugged me and said, "I'll make you proud. You'll never regret everything you did for me." Back then, I believed it. Today, I know that pride never came. What came was a long chain of disappointments dressed up as independence. So I wrote the next line. "I expressly exclude my niece, Lily Hart, from any right or benefit in my estate, present or future. My hands trembled again, but differently now, emotion, not fear. Tears dotted the edge of the page. I didn't wipe them away. They were tears of liberation. I finished the document, declaring it my free and final decision. I signed my name firmly, pressing into each letter. When I was done, I leaned back and exhaled. I wasn't just looking at a document, I was looking at a symbol. For the first time in years, I felt like I had a voice. I stood, looked at the shredded pieces on the rug, and thought, the Evelyn who accepted humiliation died with that old will. The Evelyn who writes her own story was born with this one. The weight on my shoulders felt lighter. There was still a fight ahead, but I knew one thing: Lily would not decide my future. I had decided it myself. It didn't take long for Lily to sense the change. That same week, she barged through the front door, tossed her bag on the couch, and kicked off her shoes. I was at the sink when I heard her quick steps. "Auntie, we need to talk," she said, voice edged with impatience. Her eyes were different, not just curious, but suspicious. "What is it now, Lily?" I asked, drying my hands on a dish towel. She walked up holding a scrap of the old will she'd somehow fished from the trash. The paper was wrinkled, but recognizable. "Want to explain this?" she asked, waving it in my face. My heart sped up, but I stayed calm. "That's the past. It doesn't exist anymore." "What do you mean it doesn't exist?" she snapped. "Did you take me out of the will?" I met her gaze and didn't flinch, maybe, for the first time in years. "I did. You won't get anything that's mine." Her face twisted with fury, her hands shook, and she crushed the paper into a ball. "After everything I've done for you," she yelled. I let out a short, bitter laugh. "After everything I did for you, Lily. I raised you like a daughter, gave you everything I could, and in return, you forged my signature, ran up debts in my name, and had the nerve to laugh at my life." She stepped back, eyes sparking. "You're ungrateful, Auntie. I've always been here, always took care of the house, always what?" I cut in. "Always used what was mine, as if it were yours, always treated my sacrifices like they were owed to you." Silence fell, heavy as stone. The drip of the faucet sounded like a hammer in the quiet. Lily slapped her hand on the table so hard the glasses rattled. "You can't do this to me," she screamed, eyes wet not with sadness, but rage. I held my ground, even as my body trembled inside. And I already did." She looked at me like I'd become the enemy. In a way, the cords of years between us had finally snapped. "You'll regret this," she hissed, low and poisonous. "You'll regret turning your back on me." "No, Lily," I said, breathing steady. "The one who'll regret this is you." She stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to shake the windows. The echo rolled through the house like the sound of a bond breaking for good. I stood alone in the kitchen, staring at the messy table, a glass still quivering. I gripped the dish towel and felt tears spill, not of regret, but of release. In that moment, I accepted a truth I had always denied. I owed Lily nothing. Not gratitude, not assets, not my future. The love I gave was my choice. The respect she withheld was hers. And now, every choice had a price. Outside, the sky deepened into purples and oranges. The evening wind carried the distant smell of wood smoke from the neighbors' chimneys. I looked at the empty garage. First, the car. Now the will. Only one step remained, the hardest of all: the house. The house that sheltered me, trapped me, watched every sacrifice. The house where Lily grew up and where she quietly broke me. Maybe it was time to let it go, too. I woke that morning with a weight in my chest, but also with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The whole house seemed to breathe with me, as if it too was waiting for a decision. I walked through the rooms in silence, touching furniture, walls, doors. Every corner carried a memory, some sweet, but most bitter. In the living room, the worn-out couch stood as witness to all the nights Lily came home late, laughing, while I sat awake, waiting. In the kitchen, the old pans reminded me of meals cooked in silence, hoping for a thank you that never came. Out in the yard, I could still see the chalk marks from a childhood that once promised so much but turned only into indifference. I climbed the stairs slowly, passed through the narrow hallway, and stepped into Lily's bedroom. Empty now, but full of echoes, slamming doors, muffled arguments, promises that never came true. Finally, I stood in front of my own room. I looked in the mirror and saw a tired woman, but different. There was steel in her eyes. That's when I understood. The house was no longer a home. It was a prison. I bought it, I maintained it, but I was always second place within its walls. It carried Lily's laughter, but never my voice. It held her parties, her promises, her silences, but never embraced me. I picked up the phone and dialed the real estate agency whose flyer had been stuck to my fridge. The agent's voice was professional, detached, promising a visit soon. When he arrived days later, he came with a clipboard and a measuring tape. He measured the living room, studied the light, talked about renovation potential. To him, it was numbers. To me, every measurement was a scar. In the kitchen, he spoke of good use of space. All I saw were dishes washed in tears. In the yard, he suggested a future leisure area. All I remembered were nights spent alone, staring at the sky, waiting for Lily to return. In her bedroom, he said, a perfect room for a teenager. I thought of all the times I begged for quiet and was ignored. When he was done, we sat in the living room. He showed me price estimates, said the market was favorable. I just looked around, taking in every detail. For the first time, I didn't cry. Instead, I felt something bring relief. The house wasn't my prison anymore. It was just a property, ready to hold new stories in someone else's hands. When the agent left, I was alone again. The house was silent, but it no longer suffocated me. I stepped out onto the porch and faced the street glowing in the sunset. I breathed deeply. The wind carried the scent of earth and freedom. I closed my eyes and whispered, almost like a vow, I will sell this house. And in that moment, I knew there was no turning back. It was time to set the house free, and myself with it. The silence in the house seemed to shift in that very moment, as if the walls themselves understood that their story with me was coming to an end. I stood and walked to the porch. Closing my eyes, I felt a deep relief. The house was officially for sale. The news didn't take long to reach Lily. I should have known nothing ever escaped her when it came to what she believed was hers by right. Late that afternoon, the doorbell rang. The sound was sharp, insistent, shaking the whole house. I opened the door and found Lily standing there, her eyes blazing. She walked in without asking like she always did and threw her phone onto the table. The screen glowed with the listing of the house. What is this, Auntie? She demanded, voice dripping with outrage. It's exactly what you see, I answered calmly. The house is for sale. She let out a laugh, wild and disbelieving. You've lost your mind. This house is family. This is our house. I crossed my arms, took a breath. No, Lily, this house has always been mine. I was the one who paid every bill, fixed every crack, kept it standing. You only ever lived here as a guest. Her eyes widened, stunned by the firmness in my voice. How can you talk to me like that, after everything I've done? What you did, I replied, was use me. You turned my generosity into obligation. You turned my home into the stage for your indifference. She stepped closer, face flushed with anger. So what's going to happen to me then? Where am I supposed to live? You already cut me out of the will. You sold the car and now you'll leave me without a roof. You have your own life, Lily, I said firmly. You're married. You built your family. I am no longer responsible for you. The room fell into heavy silence. The ticking of the clock grew unbearably loud. Lily dropped onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. Her voice came out in a tone of fake fragility. You can't do this to me, Auntie. I can't survive without you. You know, I've always needed you. For a brief second, guilt tried to creep in. For a moment, I almost believed her staged sobs. But then I remembered the debts in my name, the car taken without permission, the laughter behind my back. I sat down across from her, met her eyes, and said, I know you've always needed me, but I don't need to carry you anymore. She lowered her hands, eyes dry, no tears at all. The mask had slipped. Her voice returned, cold and sharp. You'll regret this, Auntie. You'll end up alone. I stood, walked to the door, and opened it wide. I'd rather be alone than keep being used. Lily stormed out, footsteps pounding, muttering threats under her breath. The door slammed behind her, shaking the frame. My body trembled, but not with fear. Not anymore. For the first time, the house no longer echoed only Lily's voice. For the first time, the voice that carried through its walls was mine. It was Monday morning when the phone rang early. I recognized the number. It was the realtor. His voice was cheerful. Mrs. Hart, we've got an offer on your house. The family who visited loved it. They're ready to close. For a few seconds, I couldn't speak. My heart pounded, and I had to steady myself against the kitchen table. It was real. No longer just an idea, or a listing, or a possibility. The sale was actually happening. When I hung up, I stared at the numbers written on the paper. They weren't just money, they were freedom. They were the chance to begin again somewhere without the ghosts of the past. Looking toward the empty garage, I remembered when I first bought the house. Lily was still a child, and I told her, "This will be our home, we'll never go without." I believed that promise. But the house had become a stage for disappointment. Now, with the offer in my hands, I felt I could finally keep a different promise, the one where I refused to live in the shadow of ingratitude. I smiled to myself, almost without realizing. Destiny was shifting. But the news of the offer didn't take long to reach Lily. Maybe she saw the updated listing online. Maybe someone tipped her off. Either way, by late afternoon, she showed up unannounced. The doorbell rang over and over, and when I opened the door, there she was. Eyes red with anger, breath quick and heavy. "So it's true," she snapped. No greeting, no pause. "You're really going to sell?" "My decision's already made," I answered, steady. She stormed inside like she still owned the place, pacing the living room, slapping her hand against the couch, scanning the walls as if trying to burn every detail into memory. "You can't do this to me," she shouted. "I grew up here. This house is my story too." I crossed my arms and drew a deep breath. "Maybe it's part of your story, but it was always my responsibility. I bought it. I paid every bill. I fixed every crack. You just lived here." She stepped closer, her eyes blazing. "And you think you're just going to get rid of me like that? I've always been by your side. Always." "No, Lily," I said, calm but firm. "You've always been by the side of what you could take from me." She collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. Her voice cracked, full of false pain. "If you do this, I don't know what will happen to me. I won't survive this, Auntie. You'll destroy me." The performance would have fooled someone else, but I knew her too well. I could tell the difference between real tears and tools of manipulation. I sat across from her, my voice steady. "You won't destroy me, and I won't destroy myself for you." She lowered her hands. Her eyes were dry. The mask had slipped. "You'll regret this," she hissed, cold. "You'll end up alone, old and full of regret." I stood and pointed toward the door. "I'd rather be alone than imprisoned." Her words echoed in my mind. Alone. How many times had I been alone in that same room, waiting for her to come home from parties, convincing myself my life depended on her? How many nights had I cried in silence, terrified of being forgotten? And now, ironically, it was solitude itself that was setting me free. Lily stormed out, slamming the door like always. The sound reverberated through the house, but this time, it didn't shake me. I stayed there, staring at the empty space she left behind. The living room sank into silence. A different silence. Not fear, but victory. I stepped onto the porch and breathed deeply. The night wind carried the scent of earth and dry leaves. The future was knocking, and I had no intention of closing the door on it. The offer was in my hands, concrete, undeniable. Lily could scream, cry, or threaten, but nothing would change the fact that the choice was mine, and I was ready. After signing the sale, I went back to the house one last time just to gather my things. I walked through the empty rooms, each wall echoing with memories, but I didn't cry. I touched the doors, the windows, the few pieces of furniture that remained, and whispered my silent thanks. "Thank you for sheltering me, even through the pain." I locked the door, key still in my hand, and never looked back. With the money from the sale, I bought a small cabin in a lakeside town, a place I had always dreamed of living, but never had the courage to allow myself. The house was simple, a wooden porch, a garden filled with wildflowers. On the very first day, I opened every window and breathed in the fresh air, feeling as if every breeze swept away the scars of the past. Slowly, a new routine began to take shape. Morning walks down quiet streets, the smell of fresh bread from the bakery, polite greetings from neighbors who knew nothing of my history. I felt invisible again, but this time, in the best way. Invisible because I owed nothing to anyone, and no one owed me. It was in this calm that I ran into Margaret, a friend from my youth. We recognized each other at the town market, and our hug carried decades of memory. She invited me for coffee, and soon we became companions, sharing long talks, laughter, confessions. For the first time in decades, I felt I had a true friend by my side. One warm Saturday morning, as I brewed coffee, I heard Margaret's car pulling up. The sound didn't bring anger or bitterness, as it once had with Lily. It brought joy. She came in smiling, eyes bright, and I realized that life, even after so much pain, could still offer me new beginnings. I sat on the porch, coffee cup in hand, staring out at the lake. The water reflected the blue sky, the wind carrying the soft rustle of leaves. I thought about everything I had lost, but also everything I had gained. It wasn't just a new house, it was a home, a place where, finally, I could be myself, and for the first time in a long, long time, I knew I was exactly where I was meant to be. And what about you? What would you have done in my place? Share your thoughts in the comments, like this video, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories.